Nathan Matias. I'm a PhD student at the MIT Media Lab, and this is Yvonne Brill, a mother, a maker of stroganoff, and an amazing rocket scientist. And when people complained about a New York Times obituary that focused on her family and her cooking, the New York Times did change the article. This is one data point in a broader set of disparities within journalism and within the deeply unequal society that journalists report on. I measure those disparities, looking at content gender and linking that to social media metrics to ask whether metrics like this chart on obituary data for the New York Times can actually have any kind of impact on the disparities within journalism. And that's hard because it's no longer an issue of publisher bias, but online it's a question of audience biases, citizen media, questions around crowd creation, and maybe even algorithms. Here's an example. Lisa Evans and I linked social media data with content gender of writers across a year of UK news, looking at the percentage of women writing in different areas. In this case, we saw that 30% of Guardian articles in opinion sections were written by women, and they were 35% of what people were sharing, compared to the Telegraph, where there were only 14% and 20% of the articles were written by women. We also looked at citizen media in the site Global Voices with Irene and Adam, looking at participation across region, across time, and the number of posts that people were publishing. And we found a lot of equality in their content. And one of the key things we found in follow-up interviews was that their emphasis on curation rather than ego in who they choose to write was as important as things like equal leadership and strong norms. We've tried to bake some of these metrics into software tools like Open Gender Tracker to link news APIs and data systems with gender analysis, with tools for R, Ruby, and news APIs. An example of this would be something we did with the Boston Globe to enhance their data with gender metrics. But newsrooms are hard. Like, the politics are there are cultures. And so lately I've been thinking more and more about ways to build APIs that can support tools for individual media consumers as well as media creators. With GABA at the Mozilla Festival, we created a basic gender content analysis API, which we hope can be built into things like personal trackers for media consumers, and maybe even a tool for writers that we're just prototyping now that can give them a content gender summary before they hit publish. Together with Sarah Salovitz, we've been exploring social media and the uses of social media by journalists and bloggers, people who look to social media for sources and for a conversation. Our project Follow Bias, which we're currently testing now, tells you the gender breakdown of who you're following on Twitter, gives you a chance to correct our estimates, and also, in some tests, gives you recommendations to see if you might want to adjust your ratio. And we're still doing randomized controlled trials to see if exposing people to this kind of tool can be associated with significant change in people's actual behavior. In addition to that, we can think about crowd writing as an area where there's a lot of disparities as well. Here we look at Wikipedia biographies, and there's a similarity between Wikipedia biographies and New York Times obituaries, which is unsurprising because the obituaries are a major source of Wikipedia information. In this prototype with Sophie Deal, we show you the topical breakdown of gender and then invite people, this is for New York Times obituaries, and then invite people to click through and then read about the people who appear in New York Times obituaries. In this case, Kezia Keeble, you can then follow the links to see whether she exists in Wikipedia or not and look at other sources. In this case, she doesn't appear in Wikipedia, even though, according to the New York Times, she revolutionized the American fashion industry. And every action you take as a reader builds up a crowdsourced data set that can become that kernel of information for the first stub article in Wikipedia, using news data to improve Wikipedia's gender balance. But these are complex questions for all of the issues I've outlined. And I'm still trying to understand what we can research from a data standpoint and what tools we can design to work towards greater gender diversity. And I'd love your thoughts. Thanks.